The Vision to Action Symposium series on sustainability in the built environment is an ongoing series of regional conferences that facilitate provocative, strategic conversations around bold, visionary initiatives gaining momentum in specific regions of the Pacific Northwest.
The following presentations are from the March 5th, 2015 Vision to Action Symposium at the University of Washington, Tacoma. The topic was Adapting to Low-Impact Development, the New World of Stormwater Management. In this video, Dan Gariepy, Senior Stormwater Engineer for the Washington Department of Ecology, offers an overview of the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, or NPDES permit, that requires municipalities to update codes and rules to require low-impact development methods to treat stormwater on most construction projects. Also, Merita Trohimovich from the City of Tacoma explains how the city is adapting their building and development codes to comply with the new permit. And from Pierce County, Dawn Anderson has an overview of the county's past, current, and future steps to make LID the preferred and commonly used method to treat stormwater. To see the other 8 videos in this series, please visit www.vision2action.us.
Well, thanks so much to everyone for coming today. I'm, as Chris said, I'm with the Department of Ecology in the Stormwater Group, specializing in the municipal NPDES permit. And some of you will know what that is, and some of you aren't that familiar with it. There's a general permit that municipalities are required to have if they're over roughly 10,000. There's many criteria I won't spend my 10 minutes in talking about. And as part of that permit, we have stormwater requirements. And this last round that started in 2012, we had to integrate low-impact development. There's been some court cases. The Pollution Control Hearings Board ruled that low-impact development should be the preferred and commonly used method of dealing with stormwater. So the Department of Ecology, in their recent reissuance of the 2012 permit, addressed it on 3 levels: the site and subdivision scale, in the development codes that the municipalities have to implement, and on a watershed scale. I'm going to mainly talk about the first 2 in all of the 10 minutes I have. Usually this talk is about 6 hours, so be grateful. So the site and subdivision requirements are really about when new and redevelopment goes in, how are we going to integrate low-impact development? When we made this revision, we added some definitions and changed some because permeable pavement causes this interesting conundrum of it's a pavement, but it's pervious, so we can't call it an impervious surface anymore, which we used to. So we had to come up with new terms like hard. And then our minimum requirement number 2, that's about construction. When you construct around low-impact developments, you have to have special care and consideration, so you're not doing things like fouling up those permeable pavements or bioretentions, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And the biggest one is really in minimum requirement number 5. And that talks about what you can do on site for taking care of stormwater in this low impact development approach. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're integrating that, how the municipalities need to integrate it within their codes and regulations. There's a performance standard, which is a numeric way, and then there's these lists that I'll go into next that are more about some prescribed methods, and if you follow those methods, then you've met the low impact development requirement. So it alleviates the need from doing modeling, and it spells out when and where it's appropriate to do it. That's what that infeasibility criteria is about. So in this prescribed list, we say there's times when low impact development may not be the right approach for the site. You have high groundwater, you have geologic hazards, landslides, those kinds of things. We want to do something that helps. We don't want to have a net harm. So we had to include these infeasibility criteria. But essentially, short of those very specific infeasibility criteria, low impact development must be the preferred and common option. Where you're adjacent to the marine environment and large streams, there's a lesser requirement because the flows aren't going to have as significant an impact on those types of large water bodies. So, for those smaller sites, we have 2 different sets of criteria for low impact development. We have the ones for the smaller sites, and then we have one for the larger ones. So let's start with the smaller sites, which, again, the numbers are so important. The minimum requirements 1 through 5. So basically, you know, a single family home, those kinds of developments, smaller things, we are only requiring minimum requirements 1 through 5, and we have list number 1. So that's going to be a list where you go down and do the thing that you can do first in priority order. Or, that's the prescribed list, or there's this performance standard where you're going to model and demonstrate that you meet this requirement through a numeric standard that no one wants to hear about. At least the sane people don't. The engineers are interested. So the prescribed list focuses on the different areas of your development. You'll have lawn, you'll have roofs, and based on where the water is coming from, you do different things. The lawn and landscape, the soil criteria is about making some fluffy soil that has some good nutrients in it, so that helps the water get into the ground better. And then the roofs, we have the list going from top to bottom, where you fully disperse or infiltrate. So basically just getting the water spread out into the natural environment or into the ground. Rain gardens or bioretentions. I have to make this very important distinction. Rain gardens and bioretentions have similar qualities, but there's a very distinct difference between them. The bioretention has specific engineered parts to it, specific engineered soils, whereas rain gardens, because you're mixing it with the existing soil on site and you're doing so many things and there's a lot of variability, we can't actually model that. So when we get to list number 2, I'll go back to those and point out that rain gardens have fallen off this list. And then there's a few other downspout, dispersion, and perforated stubouts. So those are just some other techniques to kind of spread out the water or get as much in the ground as you can. But you're going from top to bottom. You either want to get totally rid of the water or you want to infiltrate it through this bioretention, or people call it an engineered rain garden, where it can go into the soil as well, but not necessarily getting all of it. You'll see them sometimes pond and overflow, and that's fine. We're trying to get those frequent storms in as much as we can. And then for all those other hard surfaces, again, full dispersion, that's the top one where we're trying to just get the rainwater to disperse completely. There's really specific criteria of having enough space, having enough distance, and going through native plants, native trees, those kinds of things to ensure that we get a good dispersion of the water. And permeable pavement has very, very useful low impact development. It's high on the value list. It's the next one. And for these smaller sites, we're putting it on par with rain gardens and bioretention. And with the other one, we talked about this too, we have these predefined areas of, you need to have 5% of your area as a bioretention. So if you have a 1,000 square foot roof, I'm not going to do the math while standing here, but 5% of that needs to be a rain garden or a bioretention if you're going to use that method. And then if you can't do those things for one reason or another, you can, again, disperse it through a couple of other criteria that we've spelled out. All these other numbers here referring to our Stormwater Management Manual. Specific, we call them best management practices, BMPs, and they're all numbered so that you can go through the pages and pages of what all of that means. So let's talk about the performance standards. So if you want to make it a numbers thing, this allows some flexibility if you want it to be more sophisticated and model something that works for you. And there's this very specific targeted range. It says it up there. But basically what we're trying to capture is some very frequent storms, trying to simulate some of the uptake that the natural forested condition had. So not everyone's building one house. Sometimes you build 2 or more. So that's what these are all about. Those are the larger projects. And it is a higher standard where we're asking people to implement low impact development. And those flows are more targeted towards making sure that the stream environment isn't altered by this development. We don't want to create these higher flows that the council member so astutely pointed to, these higher flows to shift the gravel beds and erode habitat for our fish species and erode the beneficial uses we've got there. So that's the larger part. So it's from 50% of the 2-year to the 50-year. That's kind of a bigger swath of flow. And again, once you're doing this performance standard, as I said before, we can't use rain gardens because we don't have a numeric standard where you can measure that. Bioretention is okay. And let's look at some of the differences between this minimum requirement 1 through 9 and 1 through 5. When you have these larger developments, there's another layer of concern, another layer that we put on this. If you're outside a developed area, we put a higher standard of care that we're going to want you to demonstrate that you're meeting the performance standard. That's the bottom one. The only other way to do it is to have that full dispersion without modeling. So if you do that full dispersion, then we have this long list of criteria. But basically, that approach requires you to have 65% remain as native forested condition and only have 10% impervious. And that's doable if you have a single development on a 5-acre lot where you're just trying to build a house. You can still probably fit that in depending on the length of your driveway. You might be able to make that happen. But if you're inside the urban growth area or parcels that are smaller than 5 acres, you kind of have the full suite again where you can choose a predetermined list of following this priority list of BMPs, or if you choose to be more precise about modeling it, you can do that too. So this might look familiar from a couple slides ago. You'll notice that under the roofs, we've taken away rain gardens for these larger facilities. We're going to have these distributed throughout a larger area, larger developments, and there will be an engineer involved more than likely, so we put an engineered bioretention in there instead of a rain garden. And we also made another distinction in these larger developments. We put on par that permeable pavement and bioretention were the same priority, but if you're doing a suite of homes, we're going to want permeable pavement as a preferred option. We are going to see a bigger benefit if it's distributed over that larger development versus bioretention. Okay. So the other level I'll touch on briefly is the development codes. These lovely, lovely people have to integrate within their development codes, and they just can't get enough about telling me how much fun it is. It's a big undertaking. I mean, there are so many things that need to be considered. Road design, there's all these other areas. So luckily we came up with this handbook. We developed a helpful hints of things, places you want to look to make sure that low impact development is the preferred and common approach across. Timelines. So when is this going to happen? It's coming up pretty quick. I mean, December 2015, it was originally June 2015. So their deadline has been pushed back, these phase 1 communities, and those are the 6 big communities. And they have a higher standard that they're going to develop a program that we review. And they're putting that in effect in December. And then these phase 2 communities, which are the smaller communities, might look to them as a hint on how they're going to do it. There's over 100 communities there, and Ecology doesn't have the capacity to review all of them. So we kind of set the bar with some approaches that they take, and those smaller communities can look to those, or they can look to our information to help them develop codes and guides. Blaze on through. I'll be around.
Good morning. I'm Merita Trohimovich. I'm with the City of Tacoma, and I am going to tell you how we are going to meet the new permits, the new NPDES permits, LID requirements. So Dan talked about levels. The 2 levels that the City of Tacoma has to worry about are the site and subdivision scale and the development codes, guidance, and regulatory documents. My slide is now incorrect based upon Dan's new information about our deadlines. So I guess
the asterisks.
Yeah, there was an asterisk, so we have until December. Thanks, Dan.
You're welcome.
So first I'll talk about how we're going to meet the site and subdivision scale requirements. And we're doing that by writing a manual that is equivalent to Ecology's Stormwater Management Manual for Western Washington. And it's currently in review by Ecology. The things that we're doing in that manual primarily for LID are changing the minimum requirements to meet the new permit and be equivalent to Ecology's. And then we've changed a lot of the information that we have on specific LID BMPs to be more helpful to people and just provide more guidance. We've added some new ones, and then we've just updated others. I have this slide in here because when I start talking to people about LID, they say, my site doesn't perk, I can't do LID. But many of the LID techniques that are on this list don't require your site to perk. So the first one, which is minimizing site disturbance, anyone can do that on their site. Preserving native vegetation or increasing native vegetation, restoring it, all those things can be done. Pervious pavement can be done with really low infiltration rates if you don't have too high of a groundwater table and you don't have too much run-on onto the pavement itself. Soil quality, again, any site can do this regardless of what their soil is. This is a technique that just makes your soil better and helps it to infiltrate. So there's a number of things on here. The last four, those are all things can be done if you have poor soils as well. Now, as Dan talked about a little bit in his, depending on your watershed, the LID requirements at the site and subdivision scale are different. And that applies in Tacoma because we have 9 watersheds, some of which go directly to Puget Sound and some of which go to creeks and streams first. So the ones that go to creeks and streams first have the full LID suite required. And the ones that go to Puget Sound have a lesser requirement. And that's reflected in our manual and the permit. The next thing I'm going to talk about is the LID code requirements, which is that second level that Dan was talking about. And these are the words straight from the permit, the preferred and commonly used, and these other words are straight from the permit. As you can see, the guidance is broad, and the different permittees will interpret it differently and apply it differently. But hopefully we'll all get to the same end goal, which is making LID happen as much as we can. And these requirements will be applicable everywhere in Tacoma. So this is not watershed specific. This is required everywhere per the permit, which makes, implementing those 2 provisions of the permit a little bit tricky, but we think we can do it. So our proposed approach for the second level is to remove barriers, add more guidance so people can do LID easier, provide incentives where possible, have our equivalent manual, and then lead by example. Some of the ways Tacoma is leading by example is the Center for Urban Waters building where I work. It's also pervious pavement roads that we've built. We've built the rain gardens on Pacific Avenue, which they're technically bioretention now. And so we're leading by example by actually getting out there and doing projects. So the relevant documents that we found we need to change, of course, are our municipal code, our stormwater management manual, our standard drawings, and we're going to be adding about 70 standard drawings for LID features. And that will really help developers. When they come in, they can just use our standard drawings. They know that our reviewers are comfortable with them, and the process will go quickly for them. And then our design manual, which tells people how to do work in our right-of-way, and so we're looking at that and doing a huge update to that. So here's our process for changing all of those things. We've reviewed everything, we've figured out what needs to be changed. I partnered with our planning department to help utilize kind of their typical process for code change, so they're helping to guide me through the process. We're using our standards committee, which is the standing committee we have at the city. Folks from many different departments, and Tacoma Water and Tacoma Power are all on that committee. So we're getting a buy-in from the entire city. And then we have smaller internal work groups for certain subjects. And then, of course, public outreach. More public outreach is coming, and Tacoma wants to hear from you. If you do any work in Tacoma, if you live in Tacoma, we want to hear from you. So here is a website you can go to, and it has a form where you can be part of our email listserv where we tell you whenever we're making changes or have documents for review. So I invite everyone to go ahead and join that. You can also contact me. Here's my contact info, and I have some cards out at the City of Tacoma table. And then I just want to plug one of our newest projects. It is at the south end of the Prairie Line Trail. If anybody wants to go look at it during the break, it's actually a beautiful facility. It incorporates the rails from the original transcontinental railway, and they're right in the bow retention facility. It's not exactly LID, but it is green stormwater infrastructure because it has a liner and an underdrain, but it's bioretention using Filterra media, and it treats 42 acres. It's a retrofit, so 42 acres that used to go untreated into Puget Sound are now being treated at this facility. So thank you very much.
Good morning. At least it's still barely morning. I'm Dawn Anderson, and I'm with Pierce County Surface Water Management, and I'm just kind of going to go through our approach. So give some background. Pierce County's been doing LID for a while. The first, in 2005, the Pierce County Manual, we did have some provisions in there. We created a Chapter 10 at the time that was for low-impact development. We also had community plans and certain zoning overlays that required low-impact development. But it was a little more extensive than just LID BMPs. We were trying to reach the 6510 full dispersion thing. So our process with the manual, and thank you for the 89 comments yesterday. We have a core team from SWIM with a couple project managers, and then we have a couple consultants on board. We have an internal stakeholder group that includes SWIM employees, transportation, road ops, and of course PAL, since they are the ones who really are going to have to do the work implementing this. We also have external stakeholder group, which includes industry and environmental people, LUACs, and cities. It also goes through our SWAB board, and then eventually, and I think we're given a preview to the Planning Commission this month, and then it'll go on to the council for council hearings for adoption. So here's kind of the timeline. The MPDS permit, well, first we sent the draft manual to Ecology January 30th, 2014. Yes, we waited till the last day. And then we had a permit modification in January as part of the 2014 Ecology manual. So we plan on starting the adoption process in July of this year, and that'll be going to Planning Commission first and then to Council. And then we expect the manual to be in effect probably December 1st, 2015, and that'll be for all new permits within the county. Okay, here's a couple things we've proposed to Ecology, and I haven't read all their comments, so we'll have to discuss that. But we're going to follow Ecology's manual except for a couple exceptions. We're thinking on the MR5, which is the roof downspouts on site. We want Ecology to consider span-away soils. If you're doing downspout dispersion over span-away soils, it's equal to infiltration trench. We're proposing it on slopes less than 10% because the water just disappears anyway, but we will do some modeling so that we can show Ecology that it works. Two things that we're actually going to change in our storm manual, our current one. Right now, the permeable pavement allows 2-to-1 run-on, and we're going to follow Ecology and go 1-to-1 run-on. And we're also talking about, we've had 4-to-1 bioretention side slopes. I don't know why, but we are going to change that 3-to-1 so that we're more in line with the region. So it's not like you're going to Tacoma has one thing, Seattle has one thing, Pierce County has one thing. So we're trying to make it easier for the industry. And then the code review. We're going to use this manual, which has some good pointers, and it tells you how to start with stakeholder groups and all that kind of stuff. And they have some wonderful trainings on it. We need to minimize impervious surfaces, minimize loss of native vegetation, and also minimize stormwater runoff. And then we're also going to use the development code tool toolkit, which it looks really great. It's got some ways to review it and figure out where your gaps are in the code. Okay, all we know so far is we've got a project team identified, we've hired a consultant, but what we don't know is how much time will this take. I know there's like over 3,500 pages of code, and I'm gonna be the one doing the initial review, so I might be stir crazy after a while. Okay, so next steps. Technical equivalency review with Ecology. We got comments yesterday, and then adoption of the manual. We've got to complete the review of the code so that we can identify the gaps and where do we need to change the code so it does make LID the preferred method. And we'll figure that out when we get the code review done on how are we going to change those other codes. And then we plan on creating checklists and tip sheets for BMPs, including LID, inspection sheets, just to try to make it easier for industry. And you guys, if you have any suggestions, feel free to email me or give me a call. Thank you.